Can your boss make you get the COVID vaccine? That's one of the questions circulating around social media in Iowa tonight. So we are going to the legal experts to find out the protections for employers and employees. Joining us now is Kay Oskvig, an employment attorney in Des Moines. So Kay, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie.
Now, I know this is a big gray issue, a lot of questions being asked. People don't know their rights. Employers might not know their rights. So we're going to start out broad here with the topic of vaccine requirements. Can employers require their employees to get the COVID-19 vaccine?
The short answer is yes. There are exceptions, so we'll get into that. But the short answer is yes. Employers generally can require their employees to get the vaccine.
Okay. And what sectors require certain vaccines and tests, like maybe the TB or flu vaccine?
Right. So usually we're used to having healthcare industry and healthcare employers require certain vaccinations or tests. But there are other industries that also require certain medical information or exams. So for example, people working with certain chemicals or people who work in jobs that require them to lift a lot, they might go through a medical exam. But vaccines are a little different. And a lot of us are used to having a flu shot clinic where our employer says, go to the break room between 6 and 10 and you'll get a free flu shot, or if you go on your own, you'll get reimbursed. So this is really a fairly new idea for most of us, unless you're already in healthcare. The idea of being required to provide healthcare information to an employer or required to provide proof of a vaccination is a pretty new issue for all of us.
It is, and we are hearing that this is very unsettling for people. First of all, a lot of people don't know a lot about the vaccine, so they're not sure they want to take it yet. Then they are worried about ramifications. So what can happen if an employer does require it and an employee refuses to get the vaccine?
Right. So there are sources of information, and I encourage all of your viewers to research the vaccine, look at the FDA's fact sheets, talk to their healthcare providers. But if they are in the situation where their employer is requiring the vaccine and the employee does not want to, there are a couple of exceptions under the law where they're not required to have the vaccine. So those two main exceptions are, number one, if the employee has a disability that would prevent them from being vaccinated. That's something that the employee likely knows already from working with their healthcare providers for other vaccinations or shots, but it's certainly something that people should talk to their healthcare providers about, and then, if necessary, disclose to their employer. Another exception would be if the employee has a sincerely held religious objection to receiving a vaccine. There's also exceptions and protections under the law for those employees. But if the employee doesn't fall into either one of those categories, or even if they do, if the job still requires it, then it is possible that there could be some accommodations that the employer and the employee would need to discuss and agree upon that work for both the employee and the employer. Or if there are no accommodations that can be made in that particular situation, it is possible that the employee could be placed on a leave of absence, which is often without pay, or in some circumstances, it's possible that the right answer would be ending employment for that particular individual. Okay, now, we're hopeful for a lot of my clients. I'm not recommending, that's not the first step. For most industries, we're not looking at widespread availability of the vaccine for several months. So I know there's a lot of uncertainty. I empathize with people. There's a lot of worry this year about what tomorrow might look like, let alone next month or hopefully next year. But all that to say, it's really important that your viewers have the conversation with their employer and understand that their employer might not have the answer right now, but that's okay. In time, hopefully we'll be able to work out solutions that work for everyone.
Yeah, this is a time where clear communication is so crucial. What about coronavirus testing? Can an employer mandate that?
Testing can be mandated in certain industries. For example, if the job requires certain contact with patients or members of the public, or if the employee is exhibiting symptoms and wants to return to work and without some kind of quarantine period, there are certainly occasions when testing can be required. And I expect we'll continue to see more change in that area, but there are exceptions there too. If the employee works remote full-time and expects to continue to working remote full-time for several weeks or months, the employer cannot require a COVID-19 test in those situations because under the law, the employee is not posing a direct threat to the employer's fellow employees or their clients or members of the public. So there's some legal analysis there, but there's usually exceptions.
Okay, now we know this is a very complicated issue, new territory with us with a new virus here. Do you predict that we could see some more lawsuits in the coming months about this vaccine, especially as it pertains to the workplace?
I do, and I'm hopeful with my clients. We're counseling them to make sure that they're having the conversations, that they're following the law. For many employers, it may end up being a voluntary program, just like flu shots for others. But from what we know from previous recessions or financial hardship times, of course, COVID's unprecedented, but from what we're predicting, yes, there will be a spike in employment-related litigation.
All right, Chaos Big, very complicated topic. Thank you so much for clearing it up for us tonight. We really appreciate your help.
Thanks, Stephanie, for having me.